Okay.
Okay, so today we have Gilbert Sue from Neil Squire Society doing a presentation on employment and disclosing your disability. So I'm just gonna give it over to Gilbert to get started.
Okay. So, hi, I'm Gilbert. I think everyone just chit-chatted a little bit, but I'm from the Burnaby office. I'm actually doing this presentation in my typical office. Um, I do have a few slides, so we'll get that started too. So today's topic is a little bit dense, so feel free to drop in a question whenever something does come up or if I'm not crystal clear. This workshop is going to be broad, so it's going to cover a lot of different situations. One of our first slides is actually talking about mental or invisible disabilities and more visible. And there's of course, a lot of different variations and a lot of different health conditions, disabilities. And we're not trying to cover everything, but just giving everyone a broad idea of what to do when it comes to disclosing a disability to an employer. Okay.
And Gilbert, if it's okay, everybody just has themselves on mute. So if they have questions, you can just unmute yourselves and maybe ask. I'm sure that's fine with you, Gilbert.
Yep. So, yeah, that's fine. That's perfect. So I'll just get things started. I know we're a little bit behind, but yeah, there's only a few of us, so it'll probably be pretty quick. So yeah, definitely ask questions. So it's not going to really stop anything. I actually planned for quite a bit more time. Okay, I'm just trying to remember how to do this. So share, and then full screen. Okay. Okay, there it goes. So just a little introduction about how to contact us. I will have this slide on again at the very end. It's basically our phone number, our email. If you have any follow-up questions about the presentation, or even if you want to see if we can offer any kind of support, contact us. We could kind of figure out from there. I didn't put on our website, but of course we have a website as well that talks about all our programs. And that would be actually a good idea. Put on the slide, which, sorry, I didn't do that. Also want to mention, other than Burnaby, we have offices in Penticton and Victoria. We mentioned that in the earlier chat, but we also have offices in Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. Okay, and that's my contact information. Okay. Maybe just going to be a couple seconds here. My program is called WEDI, or it's also known as Working Together. Our program is funded by the Opportunities Fund, and our program is designed to help people with disabilities in terms of preparing, obtaining, and keeping employment. The program is fairly flexible. We had an earlier chat about that. Most of our workshops are available online, and majority of our clients come in once or twice a week. And it's usually a combination. Our program also has a wage subsidy component to it. So after we find you a job, we could actually help the employer with some additional training funds through the wage subsidy. Okay. I want to get into the material quickly, but I do need to say that our program is only eligible, our eligibility is only open to people with disabilities, legally entitled to work in Canada, and well, the key one is not having received EI benefits in the last 36 months. So that's our basic criteria. And honestly, we can work with most people. And if we can't work with you in particular, we always could find alternatives. So Work BC or other programs that we have connections with. Okay. Just a little profile of type of disabilities we have some experience working with. So yeah, just so the point here is we work with just about anyone with a disability. Yeah, there's some screening involved, but it's mostly just to check if we're the best match for your job search needs. Okay. I suppose there's no questions about the program quite yet? No? Okay. And audio's okay, right? No one's shaking their head no? Yeah, everything's okay?
Good.
Good, okay. So yeah, the topic I'm going to present on is about disclosing your disability to potential employers. It's a pretty big topic, and I think, again, just the time we have now is mostly just going to be a quick overview, and if you want, we could add a little bit of extra material in terms of, like, if you have examples, we can kind of go into those as we kind of go along, or closer to the end, I would say, actually. Okay. So in terms of what I'm planning to cover, yeah, it's right there. The differences between a visible and invisible disability, that's kind of just setting up some common ground there. I'll go over what are your legal rights and how to find those, the links and everything. I'll try going to, like, why people aren't disclosing their disability, benefits of disclosing, consequences of not disclosing, and of course, like, more practically, should you disclose and when? And then I'll go into some practical examples of available workplace accommodations. Okay. Oop, too fast. So yeah, in terms of what we term visible disabilities, these would be disabilities that are fairly apparent to people and employers just from appearances. So someone in a wheelchair, someone who needs a crutch, someone who's visually impaired. Those are disabilities that employers or just regular people can pick up without having any kind of special, training or attention. However, there's what we term invisible disabilities. Well, maybe not our term, but those would include things like learning disabilities, mental health issues, autism, dyslexia. A few of my clients have invisible disabilities, which are kind of more, well, for example, kidney disorder, pain issues, spinal cord issues. They could still kind of work without having accessibility tools like a cane or a wheelchair. But pain and managing their pain is an obstacle to keeping employment. So that's how we kind of divide this workshop, because it does matter quite a bit when we disclose. Okay. So maybe we'll just kind of start at the baseline. Baseline is, well, knowing what your legal rights are currently. So in terms of a job interview, you're not required to disclose your disability. There's nothing on an employer's form, or if there's even, a set question, you don't need to answer that. It's up to you if you want to identify yourself as a person with disabilities, a disability or disabilities. And second point is you cannot be refused a job based on a disability. So I do have the link below. It's section 13 of the Human Rights Code. And I don't think it's in the version I sent to Tori earlier. So if you Google Human Rights Code Section 13 BC, you'll be able to find it quite quickly. With these 2 points, there is one exception. So if there is a bona fide occupational requirement, that could be something an employer can keep in mind during the job interview or during the hiring process. So this is a requirement that by virtue of the job needs to be completed or needs to be fulfilled. The example here is a firefighter needing to be physically fit and able to lift over 80 pounds. There's no real way getting around that. So that would be a bona fide occupational requirement. However, you can just kind of think about day-to-day life. If you're an accountant that, let's say in the job description, needs you to lift 50 pounds, it really isn't related to any kind of spreadsheet application. It's not really connected to anything on the job. So by definition, that's not a bona fide occupational requirement. And it could be discrimination if the employer kept that in the job description and did not make accommodations. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So yeah, the key term is bona fide occupational requirement. These are requirements that are essential for performing the job safely and effectively too. Anything else really on the job description needs to be tied to the position, not just a want from the employer. So if the employer wants to hire someone who is, I don't know, let's say blonde hair, blue-eyed for a receptionist position, or female and under 30, that's pretty much discrimination, and they cannot put that in there. However, if it's like a language requirement, I could see that being possibly a bona fide occupational requirement if, let's say, all the clients that they work with are from China or India. That's a case where there's a divide.
Question for you, Gilbert.
Yeah.
This may be, I don't want to jump ahead, so just
No, please.
My question, but in some experiences that some of our peers have had, they felt like they were being discriminated against.
Hello? Is that my computer or?
Sorry about that. That was I had music on for my son in the other room, and it was running through the computer, and obviously it disconnected itself and put it on my computer. So I apologize.
Oh yeah. Bluetooth
Anyways, so in some experiences, people have not gotten jobs, and they felt, I'm just don't worry. And they felt that they were discriminated against in not getting the job. But how do you prove that, or how, yeah, I guess I don't know how to explain it better, but.
Yeah. Proving is always a little bit more difficult at the interviewing stage. If they wrote something on paper or posted something online, we want someone who can, someone without a disability. Like if they're that obviously discriminatory, yeah, if you have that on print, that's a lot easier to bring up. Yeah, it's going to be the Human Rights Tribunal, I suppose. It's not such a, I guess you could take it into civil court, but it's going to be harder to prove unless there's something in black and white. If you go into an interview, it's oftentimes one-on-one or UN2 like the employer and the manager.
Mhm.
So you're not going to really have an eyewitness to support you.
Mhm.
So it is tough, especially if you're at the screening stage. They can always point to like there is someone else who's a better fit,
Yeah.
which may or may not be true.
Yeah.
Where it becomes a little bit more obvious is once you get hired and then you mention you have a disability and then all of a sudden things change. That's probably where you have a stronger case. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So like on day one, you satisfied all their requirements, you pass all their screening, and you just happen to mention your disability during the first week of work, and then everything changes. Yeah, I think then you have a pretty strong case.
Okay.
Screening or during the interviewing stage, that's a little bit harder.
Right.
Yeah, just from experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless there's a lawyer out there that could jump
Mhm.
in. That's just from our point of view, or my point of view.
Mhm. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. But yeah, good question. It's definitely hard. So this actually did, it's actually a pretty good transition to like why people aren't disclosing their disability. These are fairly typical reasons. There's probably, I don't know, a dozen more. But usually it can kind of fit into like one of these four. Fear of discrimination or rejection. That's obvious. You're in a job interview, you're getting evaluated, you're talking about your skills. So you don't want to be discriminated on because you just mentioned that you have a disability. Stigma. That's more to do with the label of being, well, 2 and 3 are somewhat related, but let's say if you have a mental health issue, let's say you're bipolar, the stigma of being bipolar might actually just, again, kind of be on the employer's mind too much, or maybe distract the employer from your actual skill set. So that is a real concern. Number 3, being labeled as a person with disability. So this is something Anne put in, and I kind of agree with her too. It's, you don't want the employer to only think about you as a person with disability. You are, you're Jeff, you're Robert, you're Lori, instead of, here's this, quadriplegic person being your label, especially if you're being new to the company. So that's a valid concern. And fourth reason is, well, sometimes your disability really has nothing to do with the job and there's no reason to disclose. So that, fourth category there. Questions or concerns? This is just kind of what we have observed through, I guess, the last 3 years working with the variety of clients we have. We have coaching scripts to kind of go over and try to address all these concerns. We try to encourage people to feel comfortable disclosing their disability. But of course, at the end, it's still individual by individual. We never force anyone to disclose if they just don't feel comfortable. But transitioning here is, there are benefits of disclosing a disability. A lot of employers now are really progressive. For example, I recently worked with the federal government and they've kind of, they did everything. Everything that we could ask for, they're doing for our clients. So shorter breaks, shorter work days, access to their own washroom, access to storage near the washroom, tailoring days at work, days at the office. So some employers are doing a really good job. I have to mention that. And disclosing a disability would actually help your application in many ways. So one of the most obvious things is you'll actually receive accommodations for your interview and once you get started. So this is the case, I'm jumping ahead, but if you're in a wheelchair, it would be actually a good idea to disclose early on because the employer might schedule, an interview in a room that you can't access. Say there's no stairs, or sorry, there's no elevator, there's only stairs, or maybe the room is too small. So those are some practical concerns. And that's maybe if you have a physical disability that would impair you from, let's say, going on site in certain situations. I put a little second bullet point here. Improve your chances of employment and keeping employment. So that could be, receiving the actual tools you need on day one versus like maybe 2 or 3 months into your job. So that could be small accommodations such as like getting a more comfortable desk, getting a keyboard, or even major things like buying software that's more appropriate. So screen dictation software, and so on. Controlling perceptions. That's another input from Anne. So if you disclose your disability early on, you might be able to head off some of those assumptions that the employers might make, and then you could focus more on your strengths. So in this case, the example we were thinking about is maybe someone with an acquired brain injury. Your memory might not be so as strong as a typical person, and you don't want the employer to assume that you're under the influence of a controlled substance, or if you're not focused because you're disinterested on the job or in the job interview. You could use this opportunity to kind of mention how your disability, what it is, but then refocus on your strengths. And then the last two, building trust with the employer. Some employers are, again, fairly open to hiring people with disabilities, and that could actually provide some kind of bridge for you guys to connect on, especially if you're working for an agency that focuses on disability. That's definitely something to talk about. And the last two, explain gaps in employment. This is definitely the case with most clients that we work with. Because of their health or because of their disability, there are some gaps. Oftentimes it's, maybe a year or more. Some employers might not be so understanding. They expect people to basically go from job to job with maybe a month or two gaps. And mentioning that maybe you had like an accident, or mentioning that you had surgeries or health conditions, that could help explain why there are gaps in your resume. And this kind of goes back to controlling perspectives. In terms of the employer, whenever they see gaps in employment, they kind of go, they might be, the candidate might be hiding something. The candidate might have been in jail. That's a little extreme, but that's possible. Or they're out of the country. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. And the last option here is creating tolerance and understanding in the environment. Yeah. So the negatives, though.
Get my spear. Yeah.
Okay. So consequences of not disclosing. There are some things you do need to keep in mind. And these might be actually things that could actually hurt your performance during a job interview. So if you didn't disclose a disability, perhaps no accommodations might be provided for testing or interview. So for example, working for the government, they actually put you through quite a few assessments before getting into the in-person interview. So that might be sorting names, and might be doing simple math, might be routing, like looking at a map and applying some logic. If you didn't mention that you have some kind of disability, you might have troubles with their assessments, and you'll never, unfortunately, meet with a person to discuss your needs and how your skills actually match the job. You might not be placed with workplace accommodations that you need. Oh, too fast. You might be assigned inappropriate tasks and risk your safety or furthering your disability. It might be difficult to prove if discrimination occurs. So this is, again, the case where maybe you disclose, let's say, at 6 months in. And unfortunately, sometimes they look at your performance and they do let people go during that probation period. If you do bring up your disability too late into the process, it's going to be a little bit harder to for the employer to dig apart what is due to your disability and what is due to your basic job skills. So I would definitely say, yeah, ask for accommodations early on, if not during the interview process. And yeah, and that leads to the last point. Could lead to poor performance and termination. Yeah. Yeah, so just from, for example, here, working at a call center is actually one of the a little bit more common positions that I've seen. Call centers usually hire a lot of people. If you have a physical disability, it's actually not a bad match because there's not too much in terms of like office work that can't be done. And it is a controlled environment. Usually it's, fairly flexible as well. So if you had, let's say, like a learning disability, you might not disclose early on, but because of the call volume and the speed of a call center, you would probably fall behind if you didn't get appropriate accommodations. So over time, because so many calls and most of these interactions are recorded, you might be dismissed if you can't meet a certain threshold. So let's say if the typical call they wanted was 30 minutes or less, but you're actually scrambling around because you can't type as fast, or if you're asking for the same information again and again from clients, like let's say cell phone numbers or email addresses because you just have a problem with memory, that could all work against you and actually, lead to your dismissal. So yeah, the point here is there are some consequences of not disclosing that you have to balance out with what are you comfortable with. Okay. I've been doing a lot of talking, so anyone with questions, now it's maybe a good time.
No questions for me.
Okay. Okay. So I think, I'll keep going. I'll definitely leave a little bit more time at the end. I know this is sometimes a little bit of a dense material and you might need a little bit of, I might be answering your questions in the next couple slides. So I'll make time for you and everyone at the end. Yeah. So I guess the key question I guess most people want some guidance on is why should you disclose, and some guidance of what we suggest. In better words, I would definitely suggest people to disclose a disability if it's related to the job performance. So in my example with the call center, it does affect your job performance. You're going to maybe need additional accommodations. You might be a little bit slower than the typical person. I would definitely mention it. When you need to control perceptions, again, that's maybe if you have a disability that's more somewhere borderline, like say not borderline, but somewhat flexible, but you can be interpreted the wrong way. Let's say if you have slurred speech, again, memory, learning disability, and you don't want people to interpret that incorrectly, that's maybe a time when you should consider disclosing. And number 3 is probably the most straightforward. It's when you need accommodations. So that's, again, if you know that the office is going to be, it's going to be harder for you to access, or if you need an office that's, closer to the elevator or closer to the front door, or you need to have half days because you have care aides in the morning. Yeah, that's pretty no-brainer for me. You do need to ask for accommodations. Again, most employers are getting more flexible. So you might be surprised in learning that you can work from home, you can have shorter days, you can have longer breaks, but it's hard to start the conversation if you don't mention it. So it takes a little bit of thinking when we talk about scripting, how to present your disability.
I sort of have a question that came up for me just then. And I don't know if it's actually even related, but anyways, when you're searching for jobs, obviously, if you need physical access, you typically ask if the building is even wheelchair accessible, right? But when you're even like searching, like what kind of expectations should you have as an individual about accommodations if a building is not accessible? Like, do you not even bother applying? Is it worth it? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Let me just go back a couple slides. So yeah, there is quite a bit you can do on your own. Like you could read into the job. You could learn about quite a bit from searching online. Labor market reports. You can conduct information interviews. I think, that's pretty common. You could get an idea what kind of work environment you could go into. That could be a little bit what you can do beforehand. And then you could kind of look into the job posting and just try to hunt down what are the bona fide occupational requirements. So, for example, if the job is customer service, sales, and it requires you to drive 4 out of 5 days. So unfortunately, like if you don't have a car and you don't have access to, fairly regular public transportation, yeah, you might need to rule yourself out of that type of work. Yeah. But on the other hand, we can kind of refocus your job search to something a little bit more likely for success, and that could save quite a bit of time too.
So what if like the job itself is perfect for you, but it's not a very wheelchair accessible building?
Yeah, I would still apply. Sometimes you can learn a little bit more from the employer about what can be done for accommodations. Yeah, and that's definitely a case by case.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, in the perfect situation, you're applying for like, a well-resourced company or quite a big company or organization. So the example I use would probably be the federal government. If you can't work in a certain office, actually, no, they're not a good example because all their offices are fairly wheelchair accessible and they do have standards, quite high standards actually. There was another client I could think of now that wanted to go into kind of group home support. He was in a wheelchair. Unfortunately, because most of those group homes were in private residence, like actually houses, not a lot of them had wheelchair ramps. And yeah, we had to kind of look for another career path because we haven't found any that provided easy access. So it is hard, especially if you're kind of really set on one career. But the more flexible you are in terms of like what you can do with your skills, employment counselors can be pretty creative in finding work that's fairly similar or exactly the same, but with another employer. Yeah. So sorry, there is no perfect answer for that one. Oh, too far. Any other questions? Okay. Again, I'll leave a little bit more time for questions right at the end. Yeah. So this is, we were here. Yeah. So when should you disclose? Again, there's a couple parts where you can do this. A lot of people ask me, should I include my disability in my cover letter? Most times I say no, unless the job is somehow related to a disability that, it would actually be a strength. Most times I would say either mention your disability when you get invited to the interview or when you receive the job offer. So those are maybe the two that I mention more often. It's also possible to mention your disability at the job interview or on the job. There's no rule against that. Again, practically, if you know you're going to have some difficulty with accessibility, I would definitely skew towards mentioning your disability a little bit earlier, say when you get invited over the phone or when you get confirmation of the interview by email. So that's a good time. I would say over the phone is probably the best because then you have a little bit of space to kind of explain exactly what you need and you can actually hear about what they can offer. And I would say on the job is also, possible too. It's not a wrong answer. Sometimes people don't realize if their disability would interfere with the job. So again, with the call center, you don't know exactly what that entails until you're actually done training. So you might not even have an honest answer. You don't know if your disability would affect your job performance until you actually finish training, or if you actually visit the office and then realize there's a task or two that you can't do. Definitely mention it, but I would still kind of mention it early on. So within the first week, within the first month, rather than waiting till probation. That's probably not fair for the employer because they can't see you perform the job with the appropriate accommodations. Questions? And all this is, of course, like case by case. You might change your approach depending on the employer. If it's, this is like maybe my perspective, but if you're applying for not-for-profits, government, crown corporations like BC Hydro, WorkSafe BC, I'm going to be fairly confident of mentioning disabilities because that's what they have a lot of training about and they do have the resources. When you're going to a private company, really do kind of look around and maybe take your time into considering that. With government and schools and not-for-profits, they tend to be a little bit more flexible. Just my opinion there.
I've got to be excused for a second. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. So in terms of accommodations, they kind of fall into three categories. In terms of workplace, there's no tech, low tech, and high tech. I'll just kind of go into each one and that probably make things a little bit more clear. So a no tech type accommodation is usually fairly cost effective. It doesn't cost the employer too much or anything at all. Sometimes it just takes a visit from an occupational therapist, or maybe if you have something that works at home or worked for you at school, you could bring that into the work site. So job carving, that's when we take one or two tasks from your job description that might not be critical, and we ask the employer to give it to someone else. So for example, if you're, let's say, doing a lot of admin work, let's say you're a admin assistant, and the job description requires you to drive and drop off packages. Well, maybe that's not exactly what you can do because you are, you have a visual impairment, you have something that actually prevents you from doing that easily. The employer could easily just give that task to someone else. So that's a little bit of a negotiation. So this is two real life examples from our office. Changing lights for someone with migraines. So it could just be like dimming the lights, removing the lights. That's been done in our office. Installing extra blinds. Adjusting brakes for someone with diabetes. So instead of having someone who, has to kind of wait till lunch, maybe extra breaks or longer breaks might be okay. Or maybe having a flexible schedule. So you can go for medical appointments and come in the afternoon. And we also have this in our office, creating a safe environment for someone with epilepsy. That involved basically training her neighbors in the surrounding offices to notice if she was going through an episode. And this person also had a safety, it's a yoga mat. No, I guess it's more like I'm not sure if it's for any special reason, but yeah, it's a mat. It's on her ground all the time. So if she feels like she is going through an episode, she can lie down quickly. And we know, it's something for us to look out for. So these are just some examples of low-tech accommodations. So usually this is maybe like just changing small things in the office, changing scheduling, changing lights, changing small details. Low tech. We do this in our office as well at Neil Squire. We have a program called Solutions. So this is going to be talking about accommodations that are okay, I'll just skip that. Simple and unsophisticated. So this could be replacing doorknobs with door handles for someone who has a limited strength in their grip. Magnifying glasses for people with visual impairments. Everyone actually wants this third one now. Ergonomic desk and chairs. So right now, standing desk, that's a good example. People aren't supposed to sit all day anyways. And that helps with back pain, muscle pain, everything there. And this is actually for last one, print a checklist for someone with a learning disability. So that might be, instead of having tons and tons of emails, it would be maybe a manager printing out a job list or task list for the day. And that's fairly low tech. Doesn't really cost anything other than a little bit of time planning for a person with a learning disability. Yeah, so all these are small accommodations that might make a big difference. And lastly, high-tech solutions. So might be that could be technology to enable work from home. Oh, let me just get that. So that would be installing free software or paid software, like Zoom is a good example. If you need to do office meetings, that's possible. Voice dictation software. and screen reading software with synthesized speech. So these aren't extremely expensive. They're usually running, at most maybe $1,000. But for a company such as, you can think about the large banks, large institutions like the government. Most have a budget for accommodations, especially the low tech and high tech. But I would say all employers can offer the low tech solutions. It just depends on how accommodating they can be. The bigger the office usually means that they can make more of these, most of these solutions work. So yeah, this is the final slide. So it's just meant to be a quick discussion now. Everyone could unmute themselves. Just a couple scenarios. What would you do? Would you disclose or not to disclose? And if you want to, or if you feel strongly that you should, when? So does anyone want to give wheelchair user what their opinion would be?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you deal with those who are wondering about self-employment and how they would present themselves to potential customers, clients, that kind of thing. I don't know if you even get into that area or not. But yeah, you've basically answered any questions that anyone might have on all the material that you've presented so far. It just amazes me. But with that topic, I don't know if you cover that.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, self-employment is a little bit trickier. But the material about interviewing is still fairly similar. Being self-employed, are you going to be working at home or still working on site like an independent contractor? I just want to kind of know a little bit more about your question there.
It's more home-centered, but not exclusive to that.
Okay, combination. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would think.
I know you haven't had time to give this thought because it wouldn't come up. I just was wondering if you might have some tips regarding that. The ethics of it.
I think most things will still be the same in terms of like the legal part of the workshop. Like, what are your rights? Of course, that will be fairly the same. The question I'm thinking about now is accommodations. Because you're self-employed and because you're also working at home, and yeah, you might be responsible for some of the accommodations you actually need. In terms of working together, I would say Neil Squire, we do have the solutions program. And when there is someone who works at home, there usually is a cost share. So you can get a portion of your accommodations paid for through grants through Neil Squire. But in terms of, let's say, hiring, let's say here, if you could still do your job, I don't think there's any reason for the employer to discriminate, or they shouldn't discriminate is maybe the better phrasing. Because you're self-employed, you're basically managing yourself. So as long as you can produce at the targets that they're looking for, either sales or the amount of work done, I think there's no reason for them to concern themselves too much about your disability and if they should hire you.
Right.
Yeah. Does that kind of address your question, or?
It does. There's not much. Like I said, you've answered virtually any question I could ever think of in the course of your material here. You include the answers. If you're wondering why nobody's asking questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's just,
I should delete a few things and just make it
Oh, that's
a
good.
little bit more on.
Yeah, get us to work. Right.
Yeah.
Generate questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. With self-employment, I think as long as you can be confident in saying that you can do the job, the employer should be satisfied with that. Yeah.
I think like sometimes when I was self-employed for a while, like there were a couple things for me that came up, like marketing, being able to market myself. I was horrible, and I almost like devalued myself, partly because of my disability, because I'm always thinking that people think that I can't do the job as well as someone else. So if you're like putting a bid on something, then I'm like, oh, I have to be the lowest, just so I can prove and start like, getting these clients and then trying to use them as what, like, good, write something on my website or whatever, and have them be a positive experience for me to be able to prove that I can do the work. But then it sort of just keeps going like that for me. I'm not saying that I think I'm just not very good at it, at self-employment, because of that marketing piece. But if you can get past that and not worry about that, then it's just like a lot of confidence and a lot of motivation, and yeah.
That seems more attitude and psychology,
Yeah.
which are huge.
Yeah.
Those are great points, because if you have the right attitude, you'd be charging more than everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
That kind of thing. But we don't have that attitude, and it's great you bring up that point, because I think it's crucial.
Yeah.
That actually goes back to a little bit about being confident in disclosing too. So if you have the right attitude, you know what your rights are, you know what accommodations are required, you can actually step into most situations fairly confident that your skills are going to be the key driver in if you're getting the job or not. So that's part of that, is knowing who you are and what you're good at. And self-employed, I could see that being like confidence is a big part of that too.
I can see too, like when I was working, when I was in the Working Together program, one of the biggest things that helped me was, listen,
I saw him coming.
I was going on those informational interviews. So that really, really helped in build. Almost, it's like, sounds horrible, but if any of you, well, I'm sure we're all used to dating, right? So like, Lucian, please stop. Doing this like dating, over and over and over again until you meet the right person, right? So informational interviews are a little bit kind of like that, right? Just it's totally stress-free. You have no expectations. You're just going in and talking to people, finding out what they want, like interviewing them. And then that really helped me build my confidence level up. And I think that could help in both finding a job and also in self-employment as well, right? Like,
yeah, well, the points you bring up there, I think, are integral to seeing where you stand with your attitude, with however your perspectives, wherever they are. You can see where your weaknesses are. For example, saying that you charge the lowest price. Well, then you know that you've got the wrong attitude. You have to adjust that so that you're actually transforming the way you think. And I think that's you can't do any. I don't think you can make any better improvements than that. Than the way you see things and the way you're perceiving things. To see yourself as competent is, I think, you have to. And if you don't, then you really must make those changes.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go for it, Lori.
Okay, I have a couple of things here. First of all, sorry about earlier. My son just got home, so I had to fill him in on some stuff.
No problem.
Okay, I'm also a member of Cerebral Policy BC, and they brought in human rights lawyers a couple months ago, and I was told that yes, it's a good idea to disclose because the way it was put to me is if you don't disclose, the employer, now you give them the ability to fire you. And they can just say you lied. So I would recommend disclosing.
Yeah.
Next thing I'm going to ask, now I want to get self-employed. And I used to bead. I used to make bracelets. Now, would Neil Squire be able to help me come up with some type of tool to help me with that?
We do have clients that become self-employed. It really depends on what kind of support you need. Are you thinking about starting from scratch? You need a business plan, you need money, you need everything? Or is a small business like you just want to do this for fun? Or
Like I said, I used to make baby bracelets years ago, but things have changed quite a bit. Like lessons, reading lessons, some type of tool to help with my coordination. Threading, I don't thread as well as I used to.
Okay.
So,
Like
Lori, just a question, like, is it a physical a tool that you need to build the bracelet? Like, would
like,
Tetra would work for you or something like that? Because Tetra
I'll give you an example. When you look at a bracelet, there are clamps to hold the hook together. That's a problem for me. Because sometimes I don't always have enough strength to pinch hard enough to keep the clamp from opening.
Okay, so it's actually like a tool, yeah. On our side, in the Working Together program, it's more like approaching employers. It's maybe like 1 or 2 steps after like solving the problem with the clamps. So I'll have to think about that a little bit more. We do have a program here called Makers Making Change. I think we have a little bit of part of our website dedicated to their program. So what they do here at Neil Squire is that they build the tools for people. Let me see if I have samples. No, I think we let, oh, one sec. Okay. Is the camera on me now or no?
It is on you, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I have a few of their gadgets. This is from Makers Making Change, and they build a lot of stuff here. I'm not sure if they have anything that could help with like closing clamps, but like this is for holding grocery bags. If you lack
Yeah.
like the hand strength to carry 3 bags, like this is something that could help. This is, I have to kind of remember what everything is. We have a couple pen holders, key holders, like special devices they build using 3D printers.
That doesn't work with jewelry.
No, but they might. Yeah, I'm just kind of brainstorming at this point. So it sounds like you need someone who has like the technical knowledge. I could maybe put their website on the PowerPoint and you just contact them maybe.
Terry, can you send me that info?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Gilbert, do you have a link or something that you can send me that I can send? I could probably find it on the website, but.
Yeah, I could, or I could just share the screen now.
Sure, yeah.
Can I quickly add something else?
Yeah.
Just going off subject. I watched a bit of the accessibility ad
Mm-hmm.
with Minister Quattro. They're focusing quite a bit on employment for a person with disability.
Yeah,
But-
actually I met her.
Pardon me?
Minister Quattro. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was in our office during the summer. Exactly about what you're talking about. The Opportunities Fund is actually her
Yes.
department, and her presentation. I haven't been able to find like the video online, but it's on our Facebook, I believe, on Neil Squire's website. The short of it is there's $10 million dedicated towards helping people find work or going back to school using the Opportunities Fund. And the Neil Squire Society got $4 million of that. So, yeah, we're familiar with her.
Is that just in BC?
For
Because I
us,
thought you said 77 million.
I think then we got shortchanged then. We got 4. And we heard it was out of, oh, you know what? We were just talking about the Ops Fund. So maybe she has pots of money for other programs. Yeah. I just remember what I needed to remember. So that was Neil Squire. We have money. We can go forward. Yeah. I won't be surprised if there's more announcements this month because it's Disability Month. I haven't heard anything from her office, but then, you know, I'm just busy doing paperwork right now. But yeah, that's you're right on the news. You're on top of it.
She gave a speech at in Ottawa on the Accessibility Act.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll
That's
definitely look it up.
That's on cpac.ca.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully they'll record it.
Yeah, we'll take a look because that could help a lot of people with, let's say, technology or, you know, getting funding for technology. Thanks for the tip.
You're welcome.
I'll stop sharing that. I was
Uh,
about to enter
Oh,
my password.
oh yeah, don't want to do that.
I forgot. Can I add one more thing?
Okay.
They also, I'm also a member of Richmond Disability Center, and they quite often bring in this guy from Van City,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember him saying that they have a fund or something for persons with disabilities who want to start their own business.
Yep. Yep. They do have quite a bit that I know about, at least. I'm sharing this on screen. This might bring up, might remind you. Were they talking about microloans or microfinance?
I think so.
Yeah. So yeah, they have like special loans for, let's say, starting a small business. They do have smaller, I guess, sub programs for newcomers. So that'll be immigrants, Aboriginal. I don't think they had a category for just people with disabilities, but I could be a little bit wrong there. But yeah, the point here is like if you just need, it sounds like a lot of money to us because we're not super business people, but like, 50,000, 20,000 to start a business. That's maybe the Aboriginals' best loan program. That could be what they were talking about.
No,
No?
he was talking specifically about persons with disabilities starting their own business.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe there's another website I could look for. This is just their, I guess, their kind of general website. So yeah, I'll be curious if there was like a program only for people with disabilities. Yeah.
I know there's lots of like grants through the government and
Oh
stuff
yeah.
to
Yeah.
apply for, and especially with like re-education and well, and you guys also help with that as well, right? So I remember that with the Working Together program, if there was because I was trying to look for a career, like I've been out of the workforce for a number of years, looking after my son and starting my own business, and I was like, what do I want to go do? I don't know. So if it had come up that I needed to be re-educated, they would help me with that process
Yeah. Yeah.
to get a particular job. So that was good to know. In the end, I ended up getting this job that I'm in now, so didn't need that. But yeah, at least to know that those options are available can be really helpful. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'll share another site about training. How do I do that again? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So using the Ops Fund, like the program, like Minister Quattro's program, Ops Fund, you can go back to school too. So in the Lower Mainland, I think, yeah, I'm trying to remember if they cover more than just the Lower Mainland. Eligibility. Anyways, the organization is called BC Center for Abilities, and they run a program called Ops Fund. About 2 years ago, we send them applications, and that's probably what you remember. And yeah, that's going back to school. That's getting skills training. Yeah, it could be used for quite a bit. And yeah, here it is. It does say Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky up to Pemberton, Lower Mainland, Fraser Valley to Boston Bar and Hope. and Vancouver Island and Gulf Islands. So
These are
yeah, that's
self-employment.
most of BC.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Well, they do lots. Funding for training, wage subsidy, funding for adaptive equipment, and self-employment training.
Yeah. So what they don't do is like job search training. So that's kind of where like working together at Neil Squire takes on. And when we have a client who's only looking for going back to school now, like nothing else, no job exploration, we would usually direct them to the BC Center for Opportunities. Yeah, if they're that focused, yeah. I'll share this link as well. I'm trying to keep tabs of all the links that I've mentioned. And yeah, I'll make sure you guys get that.
Cool. Thank you, Gilbert. And sort of back to your question, your original question about would you disclose if you were in a wheelchair? I've always disclosed. I don't know if I do, only obviously because I need certain accessibility things, right? So like to make sure that the office is accessible, things like what you discussed earlier, Gilbert. But some of the things that I've done in my cover letter is, and what they showed me at Neil Squire was how to work that into how it benefits them and the job that I'm looking for, right? So obviously in the job that I have now, having a spinal cord injury is great, working for Spinal Cord Injury BC, right? But, you know, in some of the other positions, it's like, you know, obviously I've had to learn a great deal. I like change, you know, you know, lots of things that are that kind of because of my disability that I have gained certain awarenesses of being able to be open and work with other people with all different types of disabilities. Anyways, lots of different things that they help me work within my cover letter and how to disclose that. So,
yeah. There's like a lot of positives that maybe you don't consider always. So yeah, talking about how you learn how to adapt, things that you have special experience with. There's lots of different ways to bring that up in a positive way, having a disability, and what you could bring to the employer, like a fresh perspective, firsthand experience. That's definitely worth bringing up. And don't think always it's like a negative, like you have to disclose quickly and, it's not pleasant. You can kind of use that as a starting point to talk about your skills and how you learn certain things that, could benefit the business or organization. Yeah. So you can always frame it positively. It's definitely worthwhile for you to kind of work on that scripting. And it's not easy. So take your time and plan ahead, actually.
yeah. Walk.
Yeah. That's kind of Anne's contribution here. So like imagine someone who has like maybe a limp walking into the office, or maybe who has like a shorter walk or steps. It's not a very obvious disability, but yeah, it's apparent when someone gets up. The question is, do you disclose or not disclose?
I don't know, knowing me, I would probably just make a comment or a joke or something about it as I met the person, at least so that they're not wondering or anything like that. But I don't know if I would disclose it pre-interview or meeting.
Yeah. The idea here for this one is like we tried to pick something that was on the borderline. Like we kind of put this one too because it kind of answers a question, or it's one of those situations where an employer might have make some assumptions if you have like a limp. Like, is this an injury that will go away? Is this just something like an accident?
Mm.
Or, is this something that you do need accommodations for? So it's kind of, you have to fill in the blank for the employer.
Right.
So, or some employers might, depending on the field, they might assume it's something else. So they might assume it's, you're under an influence, you're on drugs. It could happen.
Mhm.
But yeah, we try to get the record straight by just disclosing, like you said, casually or, just jokingly. It's like, yep, I'm going to be this slow for, the whole time I'm here. Have me closer to the door. I don't know. Yeah. And it is something a little bit more visual. So be ready to talk about that sooner rather than later. You can't really hide that once you're in the interview so much.
Right.
How about depression, anxiety? I know that's, again, pretty common now.
Mhm. I don't know when you disclose it. Maybe in negotiations or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one's not so black and white, definitely. A lot of people probably can get by without disclosing. But again, it might hurt your job performance. It
Mhm.
might hurt your, the days that you're available for work. You might, need doctor's appointments. You might need time off. So it is very case by case, depression and anxiety. But on the other hand, people are getting more aware of like the issues around depression and anxiety. So yeah, this one's a little bit more flexible in my eyes.
Mhm.
Depends if you need support from the employer or not, I guess.
I think you made a great point with saying that that it's you can use it as a positive. You can use the disability as a positive. I think that's the answer. Well, for me personally, it is because that seems liberating. Because then you're not you're not anxious because you're disclosing as soon as possible. I think that works best for me, just because it gives me a better attitude toward the whole thing. In fact, I know that personally people wouldn't have wanted to necessarily know me before I had the disability. I was a different person. I had thought that I had everything going for me and was quite arrogant and egotistical. And that, even though I was popular, there's the flip side of that. I was very unpopular also. And so it just, but now having having the reality of needing other people's help and not being self-sufficient, that has given me a much better attitude. I'm more realistic. I'm not in fantasy. I'm not in denial as much, and that's a huge plus. And a prospective employer, I think, would look at that very positively. I could parlay it in a way that looked very good, and I prefer that because then I'm not anxious at all. Very liberating.
Yeah, that's definitely like bringing the lessons you learned, like how you mature over time. Having a disability, yeah, it's it's not great, but it looks like you took a lot from like the experience. Definitely, like it's changed you as a person.
Yeah. Like disability for me has been great. Yeah, and that's unusual.
Huh. That's a good perspective. Hmm. So, yeah. So in terms of lessons, I think everyone kind of gets the idea. So we could kind of maybe skip the last two examples. But I guess my key message here is it's best for you to disclose. Um, Once you're comfortable, it's a lot easier. And it's going to be easier for you to maintain your job. It's easier for you to get accommodations on day one. But I do know it's a little bit difficult to touch and talk about at first. So that's kind of where our program comes in again. We do a lot of coaching. I think in terms of employment programs, we're quite different than everyone else. So yeah, clients usually work with us once, twice, maybe even 3 times a week. We don't have, let's say, we don't need to schedule appointments in our program. We just kind of meet and talk. So I think a lot of people do benefit from our programs when maybe they've tried others that just didn't work for them. And I'll make sure I'll send the links before the end of today. But if you guys need to get a hold of me, here's all our contact information again. Yeah. Anything else I should touch on, Tori? Terry?
Not that I can think of. Does anyone have any final questions or comments at all?
Can I just add the human rights lawyers when this was like a 10-part section that's several parts again. Quite intense. But the lawyer said that they use case law as an example. One example they used was someone went in, they got the job,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't disclose
Mm-hmm.
their disability,
Mm-hmm.
and 6 weeks, I think she said, down the road, then they had like a grand mal or something.
Grand mal seizures, yeah.
I can't see what else. And the lawyer said that the employer fired the guy on the basis that he lied, and because of that, he made it very, very difficult for him to get future jobs. Did every future employer always question him? Did you get what he said? Did you hear what I said?
I think I heard most of it. So let me just repeat what I heard. So an employer fired someone with grand mal seizures.
Yeah.
Yeah, that part I got. And then the second part I didn't get all the details. So you were asking about employers in the future for this person?
No. The lawyer was saying that this guy, because he lied and he didn't disclose, when he tried to get future jobs,
Mm-hmm.
it was very difficult.
Okay.
Because the prospective employer would constantly question him.
Yeah. So I guess there's two parts to that. Yeah. with the employer dismissing someone for not disclosing their disability, that seems, yeah, it seems wrong. But yeah, maybe there's a part where they weren't doing, not hitting all the targets or something like that.
I don't know.
It's not really, I won't call that lying. It's just like, it seems like this person is just not comfortable disclosing their disability.
Well, what the lawyer said was the employer fired him based on lying. And that's how he got away with that. And the guy took it to the Human Rights Tribunal to get his job back. But he couldn't get his job back.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like one of those difficult situations, like without, yeah.
Well,
Not sure what else I could say about that.
there's a big difference between lying and non-disclosure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, how do I get that screen back? Okay. Yeah, definitely. I don't think not disclosing is kind of classified as lying, but yeah, curious case there. Probably not the best situation.
Could they also, though, like, I mean, if he was fired for having seizures, I mean, don't you have a legal right to disclose it or not disclose if you don't want to? Like, do you have, like, you have to? Is that I don't understand the whole legalness of it, and that now he's having a hard time finding a job. Like, that doesn't really make sense to me, because like, he should have some rights as well. Not getting fired for having a disability is one of those things, regardless of whether he disclosed or not. Perhaps it never affected him in a job before, and I mean, there's probably a whole history that we don't really understand.
No, it seems like there's definitely more to it. There's one slide that's kind of goes into this a little bit.
I'm just going by from what the lawyer said.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like, if we kind of dig deeper, it could be because of having the seizures. Let's say, for example, we don't have the full detail here, but if they're a driver, for example, like a bus driver, taxi driver, and they have a seizure while driving, well, that's not the safest thing. And it would be a bona fide occupational requirement that they drive safely. So in that situation, yes, I can see how the employer has something to stand on. It's not safe for their clients. But if it was, let's say, an office position where, there was no moving vehicle, there's no equipment that might be dangerous, it's hard to see the employer's point of view. Like, why is having a seizure cause for dismissal? So I think it could be something to do with health and safety, but I don't know enough about the details of the case. But it is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, I'm just going by what the lawyer said, and they can't go into it.
Mm-hmm.
But they can just give you a general idea.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it could be one of those requirements of the job that we just don't have enough information about. But it sucks. That kind of sums it up.
The point I'm just making is, the lawyer said to everyone in the room, it's best to disclose, because if you don't, it could affect your future.
Yeah, yeah. So, sorry, it's bad to disclose, or it's proper to disclose, or good to disclose?
She said it was best
Oh, okay. Sorry, your
to
connection. Yeah.
disclose
Hmm.
because it could affect your future employment.
Yeah, definitely. If it's like, yeah, if your disability affects your ability to do the job, they might make the wrong conclusion. Let's say, like a very obvious example, I need glasses. And if I didn't have glasses for the job, like I'll take double or 3 times as long to do it. So as long as I have my accommodation, my glasses, I could do my job. And the employers, again, same thing for if you have mental illness, if you need, like, again, a wheelchair accessible office. That's kind of, yeah, these are things that we should disclose early on. But of course, it's very personal. I never force or like strongly push someone to disclose because it is, very case by case. So I would say like 9 out of 10 times it's good for you to disclose, but there's always that one situation where, we can't have like a blanket, yes, you should always disclose. I would say,
Well,
yeah, disclose when you feel comfortable and when it affects your ability to do your job.
can I give you another case law she talked about? This
Sure.
is on the opposite. She gave this case law about this guy, he had disability, he disclosed it, and he got a job, but what he didn't disclose is he had an alcohol problem.
Hmm.
But the good thing, under the Disability Employment Act, I think she said, they put him through alcohol drug addiction, and they made the job accommodating for the guy.
Okay, that's good.
What I'm just saying is, not all employers are going to give employees with disabilities hard times. From what Kimberly said, there are employers that will go above and beyond.
Yeah, I had an experience. So when
Mm-hmm.
I was injured, I was working for a computer software company. I mean, it wasn't obviously a physical job. I was able to go back to work and do that. However, they didn't know that. They didn't know anything about disability, just as I didn't know anything about disability. But they told me, like, it doesn't matter. We will do whatever it takes for you to get back to work. Right. So I put it as part of my, like, when I was in rehab, it was part of my rehab plan to go back to work. And so one day a week I would go back to work. They made everything accessible for me, got all the equipment, made sure there was a bathroom, made all the accommodations, because it took me sometimes 20 minutes to get out of my car, or 30 minutes to use the bathroom or whatever. And they were just I was very, very lucky to have that experience. Worked part-time for that. It was very, whatever it took. And then I got back years later into working full-time again. So yeah, it was good. I had a really good experience with that. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. we should also mention, yeah, there are good employers out there. It's like most of the workshop is kind of talking about like what if here, what if, yeah, there are employers that kind of go out and go above and beyond to make accommodations. So yeah, it's definitely a little bit more top of mind now in the maybe last, I don't know, last 5 years. Making accommodations for people with disabilities. I know the government's done quite a lot. Private businesses kind of are some are, right up there and making all these, accommodations possible for employees. Whereas there are some smaller companies that mean well, but they just don't have that experience. There are programs like Neil Squire. We have the Solutions program. So it could partner up with like a smaller company that doesn't have someone who has this specialty, and we could give them recommendations about like, this is the type of chair, this is the type of keyboard, and just kind of walk them through the process. So there are programs like ours at Neil Squire that kind of help bridge the gap. Yeah, especially if employers just don't have that specialty, which I would see is actually pretty rare. Yeah, it's a dedicated type of position, and having that knowledge about accommodations is something Neil Squire shares with employers and businesses. Yeah,
Awesome.
Self-marketing there.
That's great. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Gilbert. It's like almost 1 minute to 2:30. So wow, we managed to spread it out pretty good. Hey,
yeah, definitely more questions at the end.
Yeah.
So it looks like everyone warmed up a little bit.
Yeah, it sometimes takes a while. So thank you guys for showing up and being engaging and asking your questions, and it was awesome. And thank you, Gilbert. I guess we will see you guys soon. I will send out the slides that Gilbert sent me to you guys. And if you have any other questions, you can probably get a hold of them directly or Neil Squire, and or ask me. And Lori, I'll send you that stuff as well. So
Thank you.
yeah, no problem. All right. Have a good afternoon, you guys.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.